Welcome back to The Belonging Place, where we focus on community, connection, and belonging. And I'm very excited to have my friend Shawn here. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first question is just a basic, tell us about yourself.
Good question. There's so many things.
Yes, so you get to pick where you want to focus.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. There's just the topic of this podcast is perfect for me. The idea of connection. That's been something that's been big for me since I was in second grade. No, I'm not going to tell you my whole life story on that, but it's just what I'm doing right now is I'm actually in the middle of acquiring a health club and converting that to a human performance center. And one of the big things is a place for people to actually connect in person around things that I think change your life for the best and for the better in terms of physical health, mental health, social health, and spiritual health. So I'm building a place of connection for connection, but we're adding these other pieces as well. So connection is huge for me.
Love it. And that is one of just many things of who you are. If I were to ask that question again, hey, tell me about yourself, and you can't say anything you're doing.
Okay.
Or anything you have.
I feel like, okay, great question. You do go deep real quick. I feel like, honestly, that's what I've been put on earth to do. For real. In fact, so can I tell you a little story?
Yeah, of course.
Is that all right? So when I was in Jerusalem, which is one of my favorite places in the entire world. So the name of my company is called Naya.
Okay.
That name comes from Magdala Nanaya. Magdala is where Mary Magdalene was born and raised. And when I went there, I wasn't expecting to go there. It was just a part of the trip that just got added to it. I didn't know anything about it. And it became one of the top 5 most spiritual places I've ever been. And it was phenomenal. And I go there and there's this chapel that is dedicated to the women in Christ's life. Have you been there?
Yeah, I did my study abroad in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know this chapel? Because it's kind of newer in terms, I don't so it has this place in Magdala, and the only chapel that I know of that has a chapel dedicated to the women in Christ's life. There's these pillars and it has the names of all the women from the Bible. And it just had, because of that, this innate, incredible spirituality, the spiritual feeling there, it was just phenomenal. But even before I got in there, I'm not an art person at all. But right when you go in, there was this painting, and I don't know if it was there when you were there. There's this painting of Mother Teresa.
I don't think so. Yeah.
And it stopped me in my tracks, literally stopped me in my tracks. I'm not an art person. Like I said, this is the only piece of art that I've actually purchased when I've seen it because it impacted me so much.
Yeah.
But you could see the artist just did such an amazing job. You could see every line in her hands. She's kneeling and she's praying and her head's bowed. And I actually almost brought the picture to show, but you can see how much she's worn her life out in serving other people. And I had no idea what it meant. Naya wasn't even in creation yet. It was just it impacted me in the biggest way. On the back of that painting, there's a quote from Mother Teresa. And it says, "If there is no peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other."
Oof. Oh, I love that.
And that's who I am. I think that is what connection is to me. It's peace. And I think that's what I'm here to do, is to connect with not only the people in my circle, my friends and my family who I love like crazy, but the hands that hang low, that hang down.
I also happen to know something else that you really love. So I'm going to read a quote, and then I want you to tell me your thoughts about it.
Okay.
So one of my very favorite writers, poets, is Rainer Rilke. And this is one of my favorite books that from him is called Letters to a Young Poet. And this is a quote from that. "If you stay close to nature, to its simplicity, to the small things hardly noticeable, those things can unexplicably become great and immeasurable."
That's amazing.
Thoughts about nature, Shawn?
I have so many thoughts on that, and I'll get a little personal on that too. So I always thought that I was an outdoorsy person. Nature is I guess I was kind of a stiff baby growing up. Wouldn't want to cuddle with my mom or anything else. But when you put me up in the mountains, my mom just said, all of a sudden my body just relaxed, and I was happy, and I was smiling. I was grounded. And especially in the last couple of years, I've just noticed that so much more as well. I dated a girl who, like, I thought I was outdoorsy and she made me look like a pansy.
I know this girl.
You know this girl?
One day I came to her and I said, "Do you go to the mountains every day? Do you have a job? Like, how do you?" Because she was posting so often.
Totally.
I was like, "This is what you're so inspiring to me." Yeah.
Totally. So I'll always be grateful for that because she got me out way more than what I ever did before, and I thought I did a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but man, and then especially in the last 2 years, I left my corporate job to kind of build this business. So I've literally been without an income for 2 years, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. And it is in the simple things, and nature is one of the biggest parts of that.
Yeah. What do you think I mean, I talked about this grounding, but what do you think that it is about being out in nature that attracts you to it or that makes you feel like you're home?
I don't know, to be honest. Like I really think it's just this, like that quote says, it's the simplicity. I
Yeah.
really think it's the simple, and then you're connected, you're grounded, you're connected to something bigger than yourself, because nature's like the majesty of nature is incredible, and that just reminds you of God. So like that's why the ocean is so therapeutic to me. Like I go to like it's I think it's important for us to realize it, and to want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and I think it connects us to that.
Okay, on that note, something being a part of something that's bigger than ourselves, I'm going to talk about a connection that we have. You may or may not know this, but in the summer of 2014, I became probably the oldest. You would have to tell me, but I don't know. The oldest at the time HEFY counselor.
Okay. Let's go.
And they're now called HXP, right? Okay, okay. So I went to Fiji,
I opened
and
Fiji. That's
yeah, so
my
I went to
favorite place.
Fiji. Shout out to my partner Brock. I was in between moving to Utah and jobs, so I got a job, and so I could only do 1 3 week. You're supposed to do like two, but I like got this special. I got lots of special exceptions. One of those I think was that I was way too old, but I was excited and I got referred and went through the process. And 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 the process has crazy changed
Yeah.
for the good. I mean, I don't think it was bad before, but from looking around and had this incredible experience in a small village in Nakarani in Suva, outside of Suva, but where we built septic tanks, and by we I mean the youth that we brought, and it was I won't go into a lot of details about that, but it was like the perfect mix for me as a therapist, but also like as somebody who loved to travel, and it inspired me to do something similar with a nonprofit, and ended up doing these service tours with kids from our for-profit for the last 9 years.
That's
So
amazing. I didn't know that actually.
so yeah, so I've
That's
done
cool.
9 years of international tours where we don't do the same model as HXP, but we kind of do it shorter, but we incorporate service and stuff. But anyway, you're involved, and I want to ask you, this is a big question. So if you want to think, and how many years have you been involved with HXP?
Oof, you're gonna age me. 16.
Okay, the
Almost
reason why
17.
the big question is because of this. So so much. It's so much. It's like I asked one of the therapists that was on my podcast recently, in all your years of therapy, boom. It's so in all your years with this organization, through the variations of their names and things. Tell me what it is about HXP, or what it is about this model of bringing kids and their parents into poverty or into and serving. Like, yeah, talk to me about it. Like, what's your favorite part about it, or what inspires you, or share a story, or just like, I know this is a big part of your life. Yeah.
It's huge. In one word, it's love. Like that sounds cheesy or corny, but like, and I'll expand on that obviously, but I think we learn to love. I mean, that's the love God, love people. It's on my shirt. If I wanted to tear off my shirt and show you right now, but it's cause yeah, it's I love that you've been to Fiji, by the way, cause
Bulavanaka.
Bula Vinaka, like Bula Bula, it literally. It's funny because I thought have my last year. Like last year, I was gonna take my niece, and I was like, "Let's go to." That's a whole long story we could get into if you wanted to, but And I was like, I want to end on Fiji because that's where I started.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
we
I
even
opened
have that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I love the connection there. We started that in 2008, 2009, and I'm still connected to people from way back then. Like,
And I don't know about you. I want to keep hearing from you, but I've been all over the world, more than some, less than others, I would say. And previously to going to Fiji, if people were to ask me like who are the people that you felt the most connected to, it would be the Ghanaians that I went to in Ghana. And then I went to Fiji. And in Costa Rica, they have a Pura Vida.
uh-huh.
Like in Hawaii, they have an Aloha. But there's nothing like Bula Vinaka in Fiji. And the Fijian people, I cried buckets of tears when I was leaving. I was like, I have to go back to America. Like, and Americans aren't even that rude, but just in comparison, I was just like, give me a Bula. Anyway, so I have since gone back to Fiji and
Yeah.
went to Taveuni, which is a different island,
Yeah.
and did a trip for Inspire for my own group because I always wanted to take and go back. And we had all kinds of problems, COVID and all kinds of things. And we finally were able to get back, different island, but get back to Fiji. And that was like my dream come true to go back to Fiji. So I've been twice, I feel, and never really did Fiji like people vacation,
Yeah.
right? When people are
Yeah.
like, well, how is the beach? I was like, I'm sure the beach was great. I didn't really make it to the beach because that's what wasn't why we were there. But
Right.
yeah, so keep going. Yeah, tell me, Fiji. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, I could tell you endless stories. So like, I'll just try to answer your question
Yes,
more
yeah.
directly because I could story after story.
That's
I mean,
true.
like you said, building septic tanks, like building toilets, like that. It wasn't glamorous work that we were doing, right? Like we were digging holes and septic tanks and
Making cement from
yeah.
scratch.
and watch somebody flush a toilet for the first time in their life. It's kind of amazing. But that, like, honestly, I think that what made Fiji so special, and same with this last trip that I just did in Malawi, like, just how much they loved. But in terms of how it impacts the kids, like, it's because, like, take these kids away from their phones for 2.5 weeks, take them away from their normal friend groups, teach them, put them in an environment where they're just fully immersed and loving people and serving them. And that's how they're loving them, is through serving them. And then just that two-way love. That's the power of HXP and what you're doing.
And the gratitude.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I mean, it was just wild. It was wild to experience it with them, but it was wild to be like a leader because, I believe in servant leadership, and that's basically what HXP does, right? It's just like you're there to guide and hold some boundaries. And
Yeah, speaking of that, sir, I can tell you one of my favorite stories because I still connect with this guy to this day and I love him so much. But like, do you remember the tradition that like if you comment or compliment somebody, they're like if you compliment their shirt, they'll
they'll give it to you. Be really careful. Don't.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
So I completely forgot about that, and I'm sitting, and this guy who had been working with us in tattered clothes, like all his clothes were just completely ripped, dirty. Like I think he wore the same thing for the whole week, both weeks. Like, and then we had the celebration at the end. He wore this fancy shirt, and you could tell it was the nicest thing that he owned. And I didn't even think, I just forgot, and I just was like, "Bro, your shirt is amazing." And like right then and there, he takes off his shirt, the nicest thing that he owns, and he gives it to me. And I, like, it's even more offensive if you don't accept it. And I was like, oh man, I really messed up. But it ended up being really cool because I took off my shirt, he took off his, we exchanged, and it became this brotherhood between us.
I love that.
And it was cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so one of the other things that I think is a highlight, and maybe you can talk to us a little more about it, but there's a lot of leadership training that's poured into like the trip leaders, and I know you're behind the scenes and involved in that. Talk to me about why what are we pouring into people, and why is that important, and don't they just need to like be able to just like guide a group and keep them safe?
You know what's like, oh, that's so funny. My first couple years of doing this, I almost didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I should because I was so focused on safety. I was just paranoid about everything. Like, I mean, teenagers in a foreign country, like it's kind of scary. And then I kind of let that go. We had the right things in place. We make sure that's so dialed. And then I was just able to focus a lot more on just the purpose and the reason for being there. And that's why, like with this leadership training, we go through and we give them the safety stuff and we make sure that they are super dialed on that. But it is one of the biggest things is teaching them like the love-based leadership. Like my background is leadership development in the corporate world. Like
Yeah.
that's what I've done for almost 20 years, is teaching executives how to be better leaders. And with these kids, like, and it's funny because Henry, our mutual friend Henry, he's wanting to do this like love-based leadership thing.
Yeah.
And I really think there's something there. And with HXP, we get to do that. Like we get to really teach, like, I mean, leadership to me is, it's Christ. I hope that's okay that we can talk
Yeah,
about
of course.
that. Like, but that, I mean, all we're doing is trying to help people be more, it's not just about teaching them to take these kids and be safe, but like we're developing, like, and you've been on these trips, you know what that does for you. And to give more people that experience, I mean, that's why I do it. It's like what my mission did to me. It brought me closer to Christ than any other point I had been in my life. And through serving and all that kind of stuff, like HXP does something similar in a very small microcosm type way. So
Yeah, I have a passion for introducing poverty, introducing new food, new culture to I call them trees that are growing. Like we want to grow roots under these kids, you know?
yeah, I like that.
If you're not building resilience, if you're not
Totally.
building gratitude, if you don't have to like pull up your sleeves and make cement
Teaching
metaphorically
them
and
life
physically,
skills.
right?
Totally.
Like how are you going when the winds are blowing? And as a therapist in the last 8 years with young adults, but previous to that with teens, like I have had a front row seat to trees without roots. Just like parents and systems who have loved kids into like no ability to hold themselves when things happen because of the way they thought that they should love them, right? And so one of my favorite things about this and what we continue to do at Inspire when we would go is like you have to go and do hard things.
Yeah.
You have to go experience different food. Like what is it like to sort of stretch yourself? You need to go into the homes of other families and see the way that they see how happy they are with how little they have, right? See them put on their best clothes on a regular basis because this is how they respect themselves and others or respect
Totally.
God, right? You need to be able to just like leave your space, leave your phone, leave the whatever, like you were talking about, and you need to be able to go be really, really present.
Yeah.
Like with
Yeah.
with other human beings to like be able to metaphorically, like we talk about in life, walk in their shoes, you know, hold their hands, like see what it means to be seen and to be loved. And the byproducts of that are great, right? Like, but to me, that's not usually the focus, but the byproducts are just like more gratitude, right? More connection, more belonging, more purpose. I mean, a lot of kids leave those programs and decide to do things with their lives they never would have done, right? Because they're inspired, because they are like, I have to do more than just exist in my one life, right? Like there's a whole system and world out there that needs me,
Yep.
right? Which, I mean, we could go on and on and on and on, but thank you for the work that you're doing over there. And this, I wanted to give a big shout out to the whole program because they're doing good things over there.
Thank you.
Okay, so also I wanted to talk about this because and ask you the question about training because there's this fundamental belief that I have about the building blocks that come underneath this ability, like you talked about. You have to have the building blocks of the safety and what to do in the country and how to be, you know, three at a time and never being alone and don't drink the water if it's in all the things, right? In order to have the fruits of the other things, right? Which I think in therapy and mental health, same thing. You have to sleep, you have to move your body, you have to fuel your body before you can do all the other things. Same as physical coaching. I would say same as emotional and spiritual, right? There's these fundamental things that you need to take care of in order to have enlightenment or in order to grow. I know you're also really passionate about this idea. I would love to hear kind of your thoughts about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a great point. Like I'm literally working with a neuroscientist friend of mine. She used to be the chief neuroscientist at the Neuro Leadership Institute, and we are creating this corporate program that is. We use actually a Ted Lasso example for this. So,
That's awesome. Yes,
are you
please.
a Ted Lasso
Yes,
fan?
of course.
Oh my gosh, I literally want to teach like life lessons from Ted Lasso and The Chosen, and then just share clips.
Yes, please.
And like, that's like my goal in life. No, but she's created the again. She's the neuroscientist, right? So the science behind this is wild, and it's resilience. Basically, it's a course on resilience. But what you need is that trust. You need psychological. So the safety piece that we're talking about, the same thing in the workplace. Like you need that psychological safety. Once you have all that, so when Ted Lasso comes in, right? Like it's kind of chaotic. but he builds these incredible connections,
Yes.
right, with his players that go do hard things. He makes them uncomfortable. They go through, but he's one of them. He's a player's coach. He's part of them. Like, they are connecting like crazy. They learn how to become resilient together through things because they're so connected. And that's what allows to like the incredible performance.
Yeah.
So you talk about training, like you build in that infrastructure, that foundation. That's what allows them to truly perform at their best. Like if that's all taken care of, like you said, the safety, all those pieces are taken care of, and putting the connection piece to it, that's performance. Like that's what allows like Ted Lasso to take this team and, to different leagues and stuff like that. The same thing at work, the same thing in our personal lives. That's why I like teaching these kids like life skills. If we can give them that foundation, that's what's going to allow them to like perform in anything.
Yeah. I love that. I love the example because in Ted Lasso, one of my favorite things about it is it would be so easy to say, like, he didn't know football, soccer, right? He didn't know it.
Right.
He came and and there's a world that says like you can't coach something you don't know. And he flips that on its head, right? I can coach anybody because I know them.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And this is how I actually think therapy is. Like, I can do therapy with anybody because it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the individual. It's not what they bring to the table. It's not the issue that they think that they have or they don't have, because it's usually not the same. The problem usually doesn't lie in the thing that they brought to the table anyway. In all the years I've done therapy, it's like this is the presenting thing, but it's not the thing,
Yeah.
And so if we can get to the root of the person,
Yeah.
if we can connect to them on a level, like they can learn the skill, they can do the thing, right? And like this is, I love this. I love the idea of just like connecting with people and believing in people and learning from. He's often seeking to understand.
Totally. So
Which
curious.
is like, one of Covey's 7 habits that I love. It's like seek to understand before being understood. He has a very curiosity approach and a seeking to understand. He also just has his own principles, his own values, his own things that he knows that works. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit earlier about coaching. I want to hear, Shawn, you've had a lot of experience in leadership. You've worked with a lot of really important people. You worked at a place called Kiln, for those of you who aren't in Utah. Well, it's outside of Utah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a working community, also a belonging place,
Exactly.
right? Which is, I love
Exactly.
Kiln. But you worked at Kiln where they're building connection and belonging with companies and bringing in people that are speaking. So this is something that you're very familiar with. But so you've had a front row seat in, HXP, in Kiln, in leadership, and you kind of, in our conversations, and we're kind of like, I want to put the things that I've learned together, and yeah, talk to me about that. How are those all converging, and what you've kind of decided are, when you break it all down, what is it that we need to focus on to live like this flourishing life?
Yeah. Gosh, you're good at this. So it's a long answer.
Yeah,
okay?
please.
Okay.
Yes, we're here for it.
But yeah, like just a short version on Kiln real quick. Like the biggest thing I learned from Kiln. So like taking everything. So I've worked with, my background's leadership development and doing executive management consulting. So I've worked with anyone from the Dallas Cowboys to the Major League Baseball to Department of Defense to all branches of the military and Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, and teaching them leadership skills.
Awesome.
So I'm wanting to take everything I learned from that, and then as well as like when I left Kiln, actually, let me go back to that. The biggest thing I learned from Kiln is amazing in so many ways, but the biggest thing, the most important thing, why it's different than a WeWork or any other place, is community. That's what you pay for when you go to Kiln. You pay for community, and that's what makes people. I mean, the idea is that outside of sleep, we're spending the majority of our lives working. So how can we make that experience and that environment that much better? And what Kiln is really honed in on is the power of community in that experience. And now, especially with remote work and everything else, like the lack of, that's the other part that I'm bringing into it, is this connection piece. When I left Kiln, I was like, okay, what am I gonna go do? Like, I want to go do my own thing. I literally thought I was just gonna go be a Mormon preacher, Because like,
Okay.
I want like
I also was like, what is he going to do? Because the pinnacle of connection and leadership seemed to be at Kiln. So I was one of the friends that was like, where do you go from there? Not that the Kiln is the be all end all,
No.
but because of what you just said, I was like, okay,
There's
what's Shawn Moore going to go do?
yes. Like I loved my experience at Kiln, but it like to me, life is not about work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that's the difference. No disrespect to Kiln in any way that way.
Right.
But they were all trying to make work better, which is great. But like, there's so much more to life than work.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm trying to take everything. So I love teaching. So, but I decided I didn't want to like be a seminary teacher or an institute teacher because I wanted to make a living. Now you can actually, they do great.
I know.
So I went into leadership development, kind of like a Covey stuff, right? Like, and the life principles are so similar. So I did that. Kiln really taught me the power of community. And I kind of was going more towards like, I want to be this Mormon preacher, but I kept feeling prompted. Like, no, you need to go towards wellness, exercise, fitness. And I'm like, but I just want to preach your stuff. Like, why would you direct me a different way? And like when I was first doing this, the spiritual piece wasn't even a part of this. It was just physical, mental, social. Like, how can I get people to optimize their wellness and their physical health, their mental health, and their social health?
Yeah.
And spiritual wasn't even a part of it. And then as I'm going through this, I'm realizing like, man, if I get people aligned in those areas, they're going to be the most spiritually in tune they've ever been. Like when you're in flow, when you got things like just firing physically, when you're firing mentally, when you're firing socially, like you're you're in flow, you're the most in tune you've ever been, right?
Yeah.
And then other things like this, it was cool kind of how God guided me that way, because it was like, I started to get into, okay, what's my background? What can I lean on? My background is leadership development, so I'm gonna go just do my own thing and be a corporate consultant. But like, what's one piece I can add to my repertoire that will be helpful? And it was the mental piece, like mental health. Like, but on the proactive side of mental health, so it was like, if 80% of success is mental, how could I help executives be better at their mental game, right? Handle stress, handle everything else, handle, crazy situations, and how can I help them be better at that? And so that was my focus. So I reached out to Tal Ben-Shahar at Harvard. Do you know who that is?
I don't know.
Okay, Tal, do you know Sean Aker?
Yeah.
Okay. Sean Aker was Tal's teaching assistant.
Oh, okay.
So Tal is the original one that taught the two most popular courses in the history of Harvard on positive psychology.
Yeah. I've taken one of those because they during COVID, they let it be free for everybody.
Good for
And maybe
you.
they still have it, but they were like, we're gonna open a bunch of courses, and this is one of the courses. And I'm a huge positive psychology fan, so I was like, yes, please.
Yes, that's it. So I got into positive psychology. Tal, first of all, the fact that he responded was amazing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's awesome.
Tal's like, Sean, I love what you're doing, but you want to do way more than positive psychology. You want to do performance psychology. You want to teach people how to perform better based on these skills, right? And so he connects me to a guy named Jim Lair. Do you know who that is? You might like this because Jim was originally a clinical psychologist.
Okay.
Jim was a clinical psychologist who was like, hey, this should work in sports. So he's like one of the OGs of sports psychology.
Maybe I've heard of him because of that. Yeah.
So then he was like, okay, if this works in sports, then it should work in the corporate world. So he's worked with anyone from Olympic athletes to Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. And I connected with Jim. Jim was so gracious with his time and talked to me about things. And he's like, Sean, you are 99%, like you're just further along than anybody I've talked to on this. Because I was like, do I need to go get a PhD in neuroscience? Do I get a degree in performance psychology? Because one thing he's like, if there's anything you can do to like really beef up what you're doing, he's like, study the brain.
Yeah.
Because there's such a mind-body connection. There's all these kinds of things. So like I started looking at neuroscience and all sorts of different stuff. Bottom line is like
neuroplasticity, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's huge, right? So Jim started what's called the human. It's now the J&J Human Performance Institute.
Okay.
It was called the Human Performance Institute, but Johnson & Johnson acquired it.
Okay.
I'm basically doing a 2.0 version of what he did with a neuroscience focus.
Okay.
And it's all the things. It's how can I get people to maximize, like we focus on 8 pillars of mental and physical health. And if we get them like optimized in each of those areas, they're in flow and they're like cruising in life.
Yeah.
And so not only am I doing that on an individual coaching level, which is super fun, but more importantly, like I'm acquiring this gym where we're going to have a physical place because I think it's so important to get together in person. And I just think whatever it is that you want to perform in life, whether you want to be a better leader, like my background is, but I'm like, if you want to be a better dad, a better mom, a better any of those things, this is what's
Auntie,
going to
friend, yeah.
exactly, basically, like the cheesy version, I'm just helping people feel as happy as they can possibly be. So they're free to be able to focus on who and what they value most in life. And that's the whole purpose of
Yeah,
what I'm
and
doing.
I just want to dig a little deeper because when we were having conversations, when you were in, which is my favorite part of businesses, building businesses, is when people are in there like brainstorming.
Yeah.
When you're like, I have skills and I have knowledge and information, I'm acquiring new knowledge and information. We had a conversation. I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, please, whatever you do, don't make it fancy and don't make it big, and just can we have the building blocks?
Yeah.
And you were like, yes, I love this. And so on that kind of coming back to what I said about the building blocks of creating safety for people to flourish, I like one of my favorite things about what you're doing in these like 4 areas, right? So is sort of these basic building blocks. So I might have spoken about this before on this podcast, but I talk about it a lot. So when people come to do therapy with me, the first 3 questions I ask them is like, how are you sleeping? How are you feeling your body? And how are you moving? I usually use those words because exercise and diet are like triggering words for teens,
Yeah.
most people. But, and often when I tell people that, or often when my clients come in, they are confused by those questions because they're coming in for anxiety or they're coming in for depression or, like, the thing that they feel like they're presenting problem. And for me as a therapist, I think it's my role, just like I hope most doctors, I know we know this isn't the case, but it should be the role, that you're trying to get to the root of the issue, not the presenting problems. Or like if it's a tree, you're trying to get to the root, not the branches, because you can work on the branches, you can lop them off. They just grow again.
Totally.
Right? Like, and they might grow differently. So I'm not a behavioral therapist because of this, because if you get rid of certain behaviors and you don't get to the root of the issue, that behavior may stop. Other behaviors will show up though. There's this, in the addiction world, like people think of addiction usually as like processing addiction. So that's like digital pornography, like stealing, gambling, all that. And then there's substance addiction, right? And they think of it as like drugs and alcohol and things. And then, but when it comes to addiction, like food can be an addiction, anything that you are replacing or numbing the thing that you really need to address. And so for me, anybody who's saying, hey, let's talk about the root of the issue. And many times it's these basic building blocks. And kind of like you said,
Totally.
it's if I can feel really good and healthy, and that is different for everybody, right? What that means. If that also, coming back to the neuroscience piece too, gives me the right hormones, endorphins, the right chemicals that are flowing through my body, which also impacts my mental health, which also impacts my relational health. Because if there's one thing that I'm more passionate about mental health than anything, is the ability to connect with people by helping people live like healthier mental like lives, because it's people just don't get the connection very often. Totally. Like about how your executive function deficits are impacting your relationship, right? I sat with a friend the other day that's wife was just diagnosed with ADHD, and he was just crying because he was like, one of the hardest part of our marriage is like, was her time management or not time management, or were some of these things. And he said, the minute she had it's not necessarily a diagnosis, because I'm not a big fan of being like, let's diagnose people, but the minute you have sort of a like, oh, this is what's happening, you can address the thing that's happening, you can compensate for it. And now it's not just that, like, for example, you're on time, right? But it impacts the relationships, the people that you're showing up with, the respect level. I'm just using a small example, but obviously I'm also very passionate about this. So we've talked a little bit about like social, physical. Talk to me about why the spiritual side. Like, why for you do you feel, I'm going to say feel called, but to add this component, which a lot of people leave off?
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, thank you for being one of the good ones, and that addresses it more holistically, because we're not individual beings like that. We're so connected, not only to each other, but also within ourselves, right? So like that mind, body, that brain, like that's why Jim said, hey, if there's anything you can do to study the brain, because the brain affects everything, and everything affects the brain. And spirituality is no different in that regard. So like, just like we focus on sleep, it's like the number one thing you can do
Yes,
for your
please.
health, right?
Everybody out there.
100%. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, sunlight, relationships, stress regulations, and like a growth mindset. But the spiritual grounding piece, and this is the neuroscience behind it too, right? So there's like, it's not just like the woo woo fluff stuff.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to, I kind of mentioned this earlier, it's important for us to recognize that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Like even Huberman, right? Like are you a fan of
Yeah,
Huberman?
of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So Huberman talks about how he prays, right? And he mentions that like he prays because he's like, no matter what I do and all the science of everything, right? And like there are times where I just feel like I can't do it by myself and I need a higher power. And that does so much for our brain, for our overall wellness, and like having that faith and trust and knowledge that there's that is just so important to all our health. So like there's so much science that we don't have time to talk about today that goes into that. So the spirituality has a very focused purpose for that in and of itself. And then also I just love talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
Like Jesus is like it's what makes me the happiest is to be able to share about Jesus. And I think it's so important. And what's cool is like I'm talking to people like Dave Butler, who is all about getting,
Love Dave.
like he's got that world religions course out, right?
Yeah.
And then we were talking about, apologies, I thought I had that. We're talking about religion in the workplace. Like Davis Smith, you know Davis?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Love Davis.
One of my favorite things that Davis said was, like, I can't remember the exact number, so don't quote me on this, but something like 70% of the world's population identifies with some major religion. He's like, we have to figure out how to talk about religion in the workplace.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then they don't not only identify it, but they say that's the most important part of their life. So if you're not able to talk about this in the workplace, you're taking away what's most important for 70% of the people that you work with.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be a place for us to talk about this. So spirituality, and you see this too, like I've actually on Instagram, I've like saved all these celebrities who are now finding Jesus, because like there was this big spiritual awakening revolution of sorts where people are into yoga and all the things, right? Like the spirituality stuff and kind of leaving religion for just being spiritual. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, which I understand.
Existential pulling from all the things, right?
Right. And I honestly get the idea behind that, because I think religion in its extreme can be actually negative, unhealthy. So I get why there was this pull away. But what people realized is that like without Jesus, like they weren't getting it. It wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That's why you have people like Dwight from The Office or whatever the Jesus looking guy is.
Yeah,
Like
Rainn Wilson.
Like, like, and all these different folks who tried the spiritual path or whatever, and were just like, you know what, it's not there. Like I dated someone who wasn't a member of the church who wanted to be a shaman. Like she was into mushroom journeys and everything else. And I'm not, like, we can get super controversial if you want, but like I'm not even discrediting that, because I think there can be a place potentially for this kind of stuff in the right way, potentially. But she was always wanting more.
Yeah.
Always lacking.
Unsatiated,
Jesus,
right?
Exactly. Completely unsatiated. No matter, like, you would always get so close, and that's why you'd want to go do more, because you'd get so close, you'd have these crazy awesome experiences, but they were never full. And it wasn't, like, in my opinion, the only time I've ever felt full is through Christ.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that completely fills, and there's no lack, there's no want.
Yeah.
Nothing else does that. And that's why I think spirituality is so important.
Yeah, and I love this. I happen to work in a field where there's this very controversial, like, there shouldn't be, but like this very controversial about how much of that, like, I'm a social worker, so we believe in, it's called PI, person and environment, right? So you bring the whole person and you identify it. Obviously, religion or spirituality or whatever you want to call it is a part of that. However, there is a whole bunch of people who in their biopsychosocial, they don't do anything about. They're not asking you about that piece. It's sort of almost like that piece sort of stays outside of the office because they're going to work on. I don't understand that. I wouldn't leave other pieces of people outside of the office. Do I always address the spirituality? Not necessarily, right? Like, but to understand a whole person would be to understand all of the pieces of their lives and the influence. Also, like most of my clients, most of my teens that have spirituality or religion, pieces of that are really impacting their belief systems for the good or the bad, right? And so like leaving that off the table would be really hard to use. I use cognitive behavior therapy, like the way you think impacts the way that you behave, right? And the way you believe. And so weaving those pieces culturally, emotionally, socially, especially in a place like in Utah where I'm at, where that is a big part of whether you're Mormon or you're not Mormon. Like it's around, it's in the water. It's sort of like if you don't address it in some capacity, you're actually doing more harm, I think, than if you just say like, where are you and what are you doing? And I think we don't need to get involved in the like faith crisis or the faith. I don't call it faith crisis, but I call it faith questioning. Like my job and our job as humans isn't to tell people what to do. Our job is to invite people to like feel connected and to feel love so they can become, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
When Johnson & Johnson, so again, Fortune 500 companies, where it's so taboo to talk about religion or spirituality in the workplace, but part of their leadership program was the spiritual component, right? So they had spiritual health as a very clear, as one of their 4 pillars. For them, it was mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual.
Got it.
Now, spiritual for them was more about purpose and mission, right? So for me, I'm going to talk about Jesus because that's what it is for me, and I'm not going to shy away from that either, because that, like, we can talk about how that's our divine purpose and everything else is so important for us to know and recognize. But the youth that you're talking about and that you're working with, whether they believe in Jesus or not or anything else, knowing their purpose and their mission is so critical.
Yeah.
And that's spirituality.
Yeah.
That you can tap, and we all have that soul, right? Like whether they believe that there's a God or not, like knowing your purpose and your mission is so crucial to like just health, let alone thriving and success in life. But yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So let me ask the broad question, Shawn. Like to you, we've kind of hinted and you've kind of talked overtly some about, but when I say, hey, my podcast, we're going to come and we're going to talk about belonging and connection, what does that bring up for you?
Again, like I'll tell you my second grade story. Like I just think for me personally, and I mentioned this a little bit before, but my purpose in life is to be here to just love. And even in second grade, and I always thank my mom for this, but like in second grade, there's this kid who's like, I can't remember the situation exactly, but he's in the front of the room. His mom's there with him because he's new in school. So I think he was being introduced to the class, and he's new, and he's just crying. And he's just like, and you can tell, and my mom just said something, just gave me this little nudge. She's like, do you think you want to go talk to him? And like, sorry for being as a second grader, I just felt with everything I was like, yeah, like I do. And like I went and just talked to the kid. He stopped crying. We became friends. Like to this day, we're still connected. Not as much as I would like, but we were friends through high school. He would still remember that moment in high school, and talk about that moment when I came up to him and had that connection. Like that, Hebrews talks about like actually I have it here. So like Hebrews says, like what we're here to do, like lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees. Isaiah says he has sent me to preach good tidings, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to comfort all that mourn, to give unto them beauty for ashes. Oof. People have whatever it is that we have. We all, that famous quote from Elder Eyring says like, treat somebody as if, something's challenging in their life and you'll be right more than half the time. And it's probably more than that. Like we're here to help each other. Like that quote from Mother Teresa, like we belong to each other, like fully. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in our own stuff. And it's just, life is just so much happier and so much more rewarding when you and sometimes it's hard because you get caught in your stuff and you just have to make a little shift, a little mind shift, and think about that person and what they going through and just want them to feel love and connected. And like, so my whole goal is to help through this program is to help people feel God's love for them, to feel connected to something, to someone. Because I just think that belonging, that's so important. Yeah. And there's so much more than that. We can get into Dr. Murthy's stuff on, have you read his book Together?
I've not.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Tell me more.
You got to read this.
Okay.
If you're all about belonging, this is.
I am.
So you know Dr. Murthy, Dr. Vivek Murthy, U.S. Surgeon General.
Okay,
You've
yes.
probably heard this,
yes,
I think, through like the idea that, because what's the only other U.S. Surgeon General's warning you can think of? in your life?
Smoking.
Smoking.
Yeah.
The only one we can think of, right?
I don't think I knew his name, but he's the one that came out with the loneliness, right? Yeah.
Yes. So he's the loneliness guy.
And the person that helped him with that, man, I'm not really good at
good.
names, but she works at BYU.
Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstedt.
Yes, because
Yep.
I had a previous guest. I had Andy Proctor on here. Yeah. So
I was just talking to Andy
So
yesterday.
Andy and I met through positive psychology,
Okay.
and part of why when I decided what I was going to do for my podcast, I wanted to be broad enough that I could bring in just like amazing people and friends that like I'm very blessed to be connected to lots of great people. But I also wanted to have a through line that was strong enough that it was just like, this is the thing, and that I didn't have to beat it, right? Like anybody who comes in and tells their story is going to have a through line of hopefully like of connection and belonging, or the othering of it, right? Like how their lives were impacted by not belonging. But yes, so when that came out, I was just like, hello everybody, this is the stuff we've been talking about. Yeah. Okay.
It is so huge. That's why, and it's not just within, I mean, it's so much bigger than us. It's so much bigger than the church. It's so much bigger than everything. Like he's issued a U.S. Surgeon General's warning on loneliness on the same level that smoking was, right?
Yeah.
The lack of social connection, what they say, the equivalent of smoking 12 cigarettes a day, right? Like, and Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstedt was like the first to ever research how lack of social connection affects your physical health.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying to bring all this together, because it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
So I'm actually working with Andy and we're doing some stuff.
Yeah, because he's doing heart variability.
Yes,
and,
doing some really cool stuff. And it's so in line with what I'm doing. Again, the whole, how it's all connected. And it is so powerful. You'll love that book.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Together.
Together.
Okay.
It's phenomenal.
Tell me, maybe your favorite part about that, or like, what did you pull from that?
There's so much. I could like just pull up all my notes. But it's everything that I already talked about in terms of connection and how important that is, and the fact that transcends any kind of religious barrier or anything else. Like we are wired to connect. We need it for survival. It affects every aspect of our health. So like that's just how big it is and how important it is. That's why I'm working with this neuroscientist to actually take this to the corporate world and be like, we need like HBR's latest, I think you saw this, like their latest article was about we're lonely at work and how that's impacting everything. Like, and that me and Janine see this as a way of healing the world, right? Like we see it like if we can, because again, just like Kiln focuses on the workplace because we spend most of our lives there. If we can teach people how to connect there, but again, I'm doing it way more than just work, but that is one of the biggest places. So if we can heal the world through business, if we can teach them how to connect in the business world, and they do that at home and everything else. But
this is where we like connect, because I believe I'm in the park or the camp of people that believe that the antidote to loneliness, the antidote to addiction, the antidote to I would say much of mental health illness, or what people consider that, is not medication. It's not talk therapy. It's and I'm a therapist, so I love talk therapy. I think there's a place for all these things, right? I'm not saying there isn't a place, but the real healing is it comes from connecting and belonging and purpose. Yeah. I want to say that like without purpose, connection and belonging is only as good as it is, right? Yeah. Like people really need, and there's a lot of research that says that people really need to feel a sense of purpose, which I think we've hit on both from the spirituality, but also from like a belonging. Like if you feel, and so I'm going to ask you a personal question to tie this together.
Yeah.
I didn't warn you about this.
Okay, let's go.
So as someone who has been single for, I would say, a long time, and I can say that because I'm also single and older.
You can call me old. It's okay.
I'm not saying old. I'm just saying for a long time.
Totally.
There are benefits and there are deficits to that. I don't even know if I want to call them benefits, deficits. There's just a journey.
Yeah.
And as someone who I imagine that's maybe not the story that you want, I think you would like to be married and have kids. In your personal life, all these things, which are great things that we're talking about, how do you find joy and happiness when you're not in the story that you want to be in?
Oh, amazing question. So many answers to that question, so many thoughts. But the two biggest things, one of the questions you would kind of prep me with, or the like, what are some pivotal moments? There's two things that I want to like say as an answer directly to that, which is one, you asked like what a pivotal moment was. So sorry if I'm going into this, but like one of the most pivotal moments that I've taken in my life was when I took a dating break. I took a very intentional dating break, and it was probably the best thing I've ever done. I was the happiest that I've been in a long, long time. And that really was like the crux and the foundation of so much of what I'm doing right now. I was genuinely the happiest that I'd been in forever.
I remember your posts. I
Yeah.
remember you're just like, you were flowing.
I was flowing and
Yeah.
I felt it. And I wasn't even making any money because I had left Kiln, so I wasn't even working. And I was just like, but I was working on so many things that I was passionate about. So there was that. And anyway, I was at an absolute flow. And the reason for like what I didn't realize is how much I was expecting a relationship. Like I was expecting a relationship to provide all this value that I didn't realize that I could get in so many other places. So many other places. That's why like the men's group that I started, like I think it's so important. Like I learned how to connect with other men better because it was so nice. I didn't think about women. I didn't think about any of those things. I was just out of my mind entirely, and I'm just focusing on other things in life. And I built up my guy friendships, and I did more activities that I really loved and like that I like thoroughly enjoyed for myself. And again, it wasn't this like focus on yourself like eat pray
Right.
love thing. It was just really like I just took the dating piece out
Dig in.
and like learned how to find value in all these other things, and that filled my life up so
And your
much.
family.
And my family.
Yeah.
I think it's so important, and that's why I think that if I were a marriage therapist, which I'm not anything from, but it's so important that each person is independently strong, right? And they don't need each other to be happy at all. They choose to come together because they can be even happier together and all these things, right? But like they don't need each other. They are very independently happy, and those are going to be the people that bring and make the greatest partnership, right? And so
Yeah.
I focused on being able to do that for myself in my life, and it was the greatest thing ever. And the second thing that I'll say, and this goes with everything in life, is learning to fall in love with the process. Like that sounds, and it's not just, it's not this cheesy version. Like I'll send you all the science behind it as well, but like it's literally even about the dopamine hits that we take. Like if we're just expecting an outcome so much, and that dopamine that we get at that from the product and from the outcome, like it really messes us up. But if we learn how to get those dopamine hits in the process, we're so much happier. Like we don't have to lean on this to be happy. Like we're happy because we're getting all those hits through the process. And when I say falling in love with the process, you're doing all these things. And when you get to the end zone and you score, like Huberman talks about this, you you get there and you celebrate, but there's not even the touchdown end zone dance. Like you're like, and I'm gonna go do this again.
Yeah.
And that's how you enjoy the process, and you just enjoy life. And life is so much more full when you learn how to fall in love with the process.
Yeah, and I would add to that because I also get asked the question I just asked you. Like people are like, "How are you? You want the thing? You're sort of living in grief." This is my answer, right? Like that same book, "Letters to a Young Poet" by Rilke. He has a more famous quote that I didn't read, that he basically says, "Learn to love the questions."
Yeah.
Like there
Yeah.
are books and that you're discovering. And
Seeking is the reward.
yeah, when I found that quote, it was cathartic to my soul.
Yeah.
Because I have always sort of dug in, and the term that I use is build the kingdom. I've always been a build the kingdom wherever you are person. If you're building the kingdom wherever you are, you'll never not be happy because you're always of service, you're always of use, you're always but that's not where your value is found. It's not found in being a producer. Like if you get caught in I'm only as valuable as the thing that I produce, then you don't have this inherent worth. Like I am because I love him and he loves me because that's always how it's been. And there's an inherent worth, and whether I do or don't do, I'm still worthy to be loved and to be seen. If you have that inside of you, like then you don't need other people to make you feel seen, heard, or like it's a bonus. It's really
Totally.
great, right?
Totally.
But like this to me is where you find true happiness. And he also C.S. Lewis also talks about this idea of individual people coming to love themselves and to be whole people that meet together, and like that is how I love this. I mean, these are the principles that I believe deeply in my heart. And as a result of that, and as the knowledge that I have, and as a therapist in a number, 16 plus years of working with parents and relationships, and I'm not a marriage therapist either, but I might as well be because I've worked with couples because of their teens
Right.
my whole career. And I don't like, for me, the arrival story isn't getting married and having kids, because there is pain points and there are challenges when you yoke yourself to all those things, just like there is joy and there is deep love, right? Like,
Yeah.
you got to be happy where you are. And then everything else is bonus, right? If you're trying to find happiness in other people. Also, that's not, I don't think, fair to other people to like
No.
expect for them to make you, to make you happy. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd be incredibly miserable if we expected one person to like satisfy all our needs. It's just
Yeah.
not realistic.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
One question and then my last question that I kind of ask most people. But Sean, if you were to look ahead 10 years from now, you're a very goal-oriented person. I think you're very like, okay, what do I want to be? But what are the seeds that you need to plant today or in the next, 2025 in order for you to be able to reach the goals that you want in the far future?
Yeah, you talked about simplicity, like really, like I just saw a visual the other day that had two ladders, right? And it said the importance of small steps. And it had all these rungs, right? And you can reach those little rungs, right? You can do that. And it had this other ladder, the same height, but the rungs were much further apart, right? And you couldn't even get to the first rung because it was so,
Impossible,
right?
yeah.
And so really it is just about these small steps and making sure that I'm doing that well, if that makes sense. Like if I'm doing this coaching program and I'm talking about sleep, exercise, nutrition, something like all that kind of stuff, and that's how you can like perform, like I got to be doing that myself. Like those are the baby steps to help me get there. And then for me, like one of my greatest weaknesses is follow through. Like I have all these great, grand, amazing ideas, but I just got to follow through with them and stick with some of these, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
That's like one of the things I'm going through right now. It's like, I keep feeling God saying like, you keep going. Like, even though it is so hard and everybody's saying pull out, but like, I know that it's important for me to just keep going.
Yeah, and I want to validate this. I, as a person who's started things, and as a person who the personality and also my ADHD says just start a bunch of things but don't follow through. There is such a power in the one step after the next step after the next step, and next thing you know, you're looking back and there's just this greatness, and nobody else can feel the feeling that you have when you have stepped that path.
Yeah.
There's something like really beautiful in, I often say to people, not everybody wants to build the train, but everybody wants to ride the train.
Totally.
Right? So there's something really remarkable about people like you who want to build the train.
Yeah.
Please build the train so that other people who don't necessarily have that skill set or knowledge or the connections that you have can get on that train and ride that to like better health and better like holistic being. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you for like validating that and encouraging that, because it is hard sometimes, and that's why I appreciate that. And it's oh man, yeah. Anyway, I lost that thought. Keep going.
So my last question for you is just is there anything else in this topic or in this that we didn't hit that you were just like, or that you want to say to audiences that will be like hearing or listening when it comes to connection and belonging and just like this whole realm of like the importance of
man, I really wish I would have remembered that thought that I was like, you just sparked something in my mind and then it literally just went. But what were you saying before just a second ago? Say that again. I think it's going to remind me.
What was I saying?
It was good. It was really good.
I can't even remember.
Was it the building blocks and how to get there?
Building the train?
This is
Okay.
like, oh yeah, let me just put this out there. If it's not, I think you even mentioned this when we were talking off camera and stuff. It was like, it's not about you, right? Like we were talking about a podcast and stuff like that. I've felt like I needed to do that for a long time, or put things out there, or even this coaching program and stuff like that. And I've been putting it off because I've been so afraid of like, what if it doesn't stick?
Yeah.
Like what if people think it's dumb? Like, or like, I've been so worried about what other people think. And God kind of woke me up one day and was just like, idiot. He didn't say that.
Yeah. Hey, Sean.
Yeah. But he's like, it's not about you. Yeah. You putting stuff out there, it's not about you. Like, it's about, like, it's my stuff, right? Like, so have you listened to Dallas Jenkins' latest talk at BYU, Loaves and Fishes?
Yes.
So
Yes.
good. It's just like, we are all given a divine gift. And that's the key part. Like, it's divine that God has given that uniquely to us. And it's the whole parable of the talents. Like if we don't put it out, like it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's been my problem. I've been so afraid of putting it out there because I want it to be perfect, and I'm afraid of what if it's not, and what if people don't like it, and all these things. And I got to realize that's not me. It's like, it's God. Like, and me not putting it out there is not willing to like put his stuff out there. So it's so much easier to put it out there when you're like, oh, it's not even me, it's God. So they're not rejecting. I don't have to take it personal that way. We just have to come to the table with our loaves and fishes. And I think that is so important for us to do, no matter what our loaves and fishes are. If you, whatever you have in your soul and in your gut and like you want to put out there, doesn't matter how small, how big, how imperfect it is, put it out there. Let God do work his miracles with it. And I'm telling myself that as much as anybody else. But I think that's one of the things that we need to realize. And doing that brings us all together, like, again, belonging, connection. When we put out our divine gifts and there's that diversity, it brings us together in this beautiful way that, I mean, that's how God intended it. Like we're meant to do that.
And part of why I wanted to get people on here and talk about not necessarily their arrival, but their becoming.
Totally.
Like when you're in the messy middle, or even if you're not messy, like you're very smart and talented and have all the things, but it's like, even you are sitting here saying, I don't know if like that's so human. Like that's so relatable. Blake Makowski wrote a book called Start Something That Matters years and years and years ago. And it was very inspiring to me when I was putting together my nonprofit, because I didn't have an MBA and I didn't have a degree that said you can start something. And luckily, nobody in my life was like, you can't do that. So we just did it.
Yeah.
And because we did it and we built the train and it's become something really, remarkable. I wouldn't even say big. I'm a big fan of just like do good in the corner of your world that you're in. Just grow where you are. And to those people who are listening, that are like, I'm not a starter. I'm not a creator. It's like the great thing about life is like you can connect to people,
Exactly.
right? You can also help people that are creators and builders, help things to foster and grow and stay consistent. Because some of those people are just like, I'm not a follow through, or I'm not a like continue to do it after I've built it, right? Like there's a place in this for everybody to sort of stand in their truth and who's your best you, and you don't have to feel like you have to start it or build it. Everybody who starts and builds needs people who can ride on the train and who can join and who can be coached. And
that's the puzzle piece of coming out. That's why we belong to each other. We can't all be the same. We have to have our different pieces, and that's why we bring them together. And that's the masterpiece.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's a cool thought.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. We're gonna put your coaching information and other things in the liner, so you guys should check it out. And there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon for you and all that you're being a part of. So thanks, Sean.
Sure. Thank you. Honestly, if I can just say, like, thank you for being one, like, again, like, so good. You've been such a supporter from the beginning. It's meant a lot. And it honestly, it is you're and the good that you're putting out there in the world. Like, grateful for it. Like, for real. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.